Welcome everyone to the Mastermind Book Club to another session of a very powerful book. In this book, we've learned unbelievable things about our money system. And to introduce us to the second part of this book, Ty, what's the name of the book and the author?
The name of the book is The Changing World Order, but I forgot the
By
author.
Ray Dalio. By Ray
By
Dalio.
Ray Dalio. Thanks,
Yes.
David.
All right. And what is your quick summary on this book?
Well, what I got out of it is a deep history on like the transition that our money has taken throughout the years, and how it's like when these countries don't agree, or when they have a war or something and they pay so much money for these wars, it costs them if they lose the war. And then it's like their banking system has to make more money, which will deplete the system, the monetary value, and it makes the money go down. And that's kind of what's happening with the American dollar as well. So I'm going to pay more attention to this, to this book and reread it, because it is interesting about the history of the money system in our country.
Actually,
Thank you.
it's weird, Ty, because the actual dollar has gone up. It's weird. Weird.
Really,
Yes,
from what I got, well, yeah, well,
it's weird. But
it's
Reggie,
crazy. It's like this.
thank you, Ty. By the way, thank you, thank you,
You're welcome.
Ty. Reggie, sorry, Reggie.
Yes, the fundamental principle or focus that I'll touch on, it has to do with power and how you use power. And in this book, it really kind of touched on that because America is in a position of power and dominance, being the one or basic world power in terms of against all the other countries. And with so much so that, for example, our currency is at the top, and it's the reserve currency. So basically, our money is valuable everywhere, right? So, but at the same time, as we're where we are, there's some things that we're not necessarily doing that is so great, and we're necessarily positioning or potentially positioning ourselves to fall just by some of the practices that we're doing with our money and just in general. So we have to be very careful of that. But at the same time, with power, you have to be careful how you use your power, because being in a position of power, you don't want to step on people and trudge on people and use your power in a negative way, because there's always a case where someone may eventually surpass you, as is potentially what's happening now with China. And um and so we don't want to do things where we trudge on people, as I said, and stomp on people, and then if we lose that position of power, then they turn around and do it to us. So we have to be very careful about how we use our power and how we just keep our footing and keep our stances where we are in terms of our position as the global power.
That's right. Thank you, Reggie. You are completely on the money, Mr. Charles. I guess Charles can't speak, so we'll head to Gina. Gina, you gotta unmute yourself, Gina.
Okay, great. So, guys, what I learned from this book is that everything undergoes a cycle. Everything undergoes a cycle. And so, when we are aware of that, then we are able to make better decisions in this world. And so, I'm reminded of a text in the Bible that said there is a time for everything under the sun. And there's also a text that says that there is nothing new under the sun. And I used to wonder what that was all about. And when I was reading this book by Ray Dalio, it gave me a great idea of how we don't perceive things the way they are. We just look at them, and he was talking, especially as Americans, we look at things from a short-term basis rather, as opposed to the Chinese that look at them from a long cycle of things happening. So we see things that are happening today, and we're like, oh gosh, that's just so terrible. This is we have never seen such a thing before. And our history, American history is a lot shorter than Chinese history that goes back, centuries. Um, and so they see things according to, a long-term view of what's going on right now and what's going to happen next. The rest of us, we get caught up into this era and we get stuck. And so he was also saying that the Chinese have a way of looking at things from perspective of I want to learn, so they're going to ask questions so that they can learn. And he said, with his perspective of Americans, we're more interested in letting people know what we think rather than trying to learn from them. So those are some of the things that I gathered from the book. David?
Gina, awesome. Very, very good summary. Appreciate that, Gina. Charles, are you ready?
Yes, good evening, everyone. In the book, Ray Dalio talks in the New World Order. The illustration of the bell curve is what I want to mention. That in the bell curve, you can see that nations do very well when they come together as one people and they combine the resources and everyone shares in responsibility. However, the demise of a nation and empires comes with greed, deceptions, overconsumption, and the ability just not to consider, I guess, the society as a whole. So therefore, in the book, with that bell curve that Ray Dalio was describing, it's like you start at one point, you hit a high, and then you come back down. That's why I want to talk, what I was mentioning, just what Gina had talked about in her last comments. So that's what I wanted to mention, that if we as a nation don't consider each other, don't consider the advancements of each and every individual, the whole thing will fall apart. And that's what history has proven to us.
Thank you, Charles. Really appreciate that. And that's true. Once we get on the high side, things eventually start to come tumbling down. That's a reality. Now, I'm going to attempt to give a brief summary in reference to what you said, and I also want to let you know about our current situation, because what we read in this book is happening in the world right now, just as everyone mentioned. And the reality is, what do you do next if it's happening now? What do you do next? As Gina mentioned, that it's happened in history, and the Chinese are the ones that are most prepared for what's happening now. Number one is there's a short-term and a long-term debt cycle, which we talked about in part one. There's a 7 to 10-year span on a short-term cycle, and there's a 50 to 80 years on a long-term debt cycle. What happens in stage one? I'd like to share my screen because there are 5 different things that you can see here. Whoops, give me a second. There we go. Here we go. Where is it? I'm looking for the window. Here we go. Okay, so stage one is when a new world order begins. What was the previous world order? It used to be Europe, if I'm not mistaken, the Netherlands. Is that right? Or the British, And then before that world order, when were the British? It was in the 1700, 1800. If I'm not correct, let me know. Someone, you can nod your head. I could see you. And before that, it was the Dutch. And now before the Dutch, there was another a world power. But this is what's happening now. Stage one, a new world order begins. How do we know a new world order begins? Well, we'd have to get to stage 6. Number 2 is when the resources that are allocated in a system and government bureaucracies are built and refined, which, if done well, leads to what? I don't remember what it leads to. When there is peace and prosperity, it leads to what? Less crime, relaxation, no worries, and so on. When there are great excesses in spending and debt and the widening of wealth and political gaps, which leads to what? More crime, less law, and so on. And then stage 5, when there are very bad financial conditions and intense conflict, which leads to what? Number 6, where there's civil war, revolutions, which leads to what? To the number 1, to the new world order beginning. Now, as I stop sharing here, I want to let you know the quickest route on this. Number 1 is we're in stage 6 right now. Russia's at war with Ukraine. They don't need to be at war, but Russia wants more power, more monetary power, which I believe Reggie mentioned about power and monetary power. But the reality is that China also wants power. They want Taiwan. India wants Pakistan, I believe. The Israelites want another nation, Palestine, I believe. Is that right? But the reality is that the Saudi Arabians are involved as well. Why is this all happening? Number one, our leaders are not doing what they need to do, meaning that President Biden is probably going to go down as one of the worst presidents in history. Probably one of the worst presidents in history. Number two, there's high inflation, which shows that we are entering into what is absolutely necessary, a great reset. And what have I learned in reference to my education? A lot of people begin to use debt. Why? Because if you hear the wording on every place that you go to, there's huge calamities coming. More rich are going to become richer, and the poor are going to become poorer. Max out on your credit cards. Use it now. There's a lot of advantages to get money and have little interest. And what do I mean by this? If you see yourself in a terrible situation, you'll have cash, because cash is running out. Cash is running out. What do I mean by this? There's something called a central banking digital coin. Central bank digital coin that's going to be coming out in the next 2 years, maybe 3 years. This is the year that everybody's preparing for this craziness. This is the year that everybody's preparing for this craziness. I know I'm off my time here because I'm 4 minutes, but the reality is if we had a little bit more time, I would tell you exactly what this is all about. And what it is all about is that they're going to remove all paper money and attempt to track whatever you do with digital currencies, because it is traceable. Eventually, crypto will have its power in hand, whether the Chinese are going to be involved as the leaders, or the Russians, or the US, or Europe, or whoever else. Someone's going to have the upper hand in this, and right now it looks like it's the Salvadorians, I believe, because Bukele has is the first country to accept Bitcoin as their currency. So this is it with the Mastermind Book Club. I could go on and on and on and explain much more, but the reality is, why don't you look up Ray Dalio and read The Changing World Order? I know it's a complex book to listen to, but if you listen to the first chapter and the last chapter, you will get everything that you need to know, and then just research it little by little on the internet. Take care, and until next week, where we'll review another book, another empowering book that will lead you from where you are today to where you really